So we have three really awesome guys on the show today. The first one, and we're all talking about social tokens. We have Alex Masmej, creator of the Alex token. We have Brian Flynn, creator of the JAMM token, and Cooper Turley, currently running community at Audius, but also the founder of Personal Token Agency, the first talent agency for personal token creators. So welcome to the CoinGecko Meetup, guys.
Thanks, Bobby. Good to be here. Great to be here.
So guys, let's go for a start, right? Let's see. Let's go with the basics, right? So maybe can one of you maybe help us explain to us what are social tokens, and do you see any differences with the term personal tokens?
I can go for personal tokens, but I know there's other definitions like social tokens, which is the umbrella between personal tokens and community tokens. But for me, a personal token, like Alex, is like a stock, but centered around a person or a community instead of a company with equity. And that stock's value can come from future equity, revenue, work, product, services, engagement, anything really. And it can also be used for freelancers, like 1 token equals 1 hour of my time, or for raising funds, like I've done against my future income, or yeah, for certain actions like posting a tweet, securing like a sponsorship deal. Like this endless possibilities. And I use the word stock as a metaphor, like it's not actually a stock. Yeah.
So I like the word social token to kind of describe the categories of a personal token, because tokens are inherently programmable, right? And the thing you're trying to figure out with tokens most of the time is how do you get a third party to contribute to the token to increase the value of it. And when it's centered around a person or instead of a brand, it's really hard to get outsiders to contribute to the value of it. So like when I was creating my token personally, I went for more of a social token versus a personal token because I could have other people contribute to make that token more valuable in some capacity. So those are kind of like two different approaches that Alex and I took, is where I took more of a community approach and Alex more of a personal token approach, but they're both technically social tokens.
Sweet. Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty wide umbrella, as they mentioned. I think social tokens are inherently just anything that, an individual or community creates to basically aggregate people in that community. And so I think that what Brian and Alex both said, there's a bunch of different ways that they can be used. And we're just sort of now on the fringe of exploring new use cases and sort of carving out this brand new sector that's getting pretty exciting pretty quickly.
What do you guys think about like community tokens like meme? Do you consider them part of this social token phenomena as well? I mean, it's seen like a 20x run up in price in the past few days, like phenomenal growth, especially NFT. Yeah.
I think between whale and meme, they're both two social tokens based around the context of NFTs themselves, right? So you have this notion of digital scarcity behind like other digital scarcity in tokens. So, people who hold tokens think that there's some value behind them just because, they could always obtain this secondary order of digital scarcity to some capacity. But they're probably more attuned to like NFT NFT tokens, right, instead of community tokens, because it's not really about the community creating value, but more centered around these NFTs having value back behind some of these tokens.
What do you think about Whale? Like Whale says that it's a social token backed by NFTs. Like, how do we know which NFTs are backing this thing? Is it really? Do we know these NFTs are really backing these tokens, or is just like some sayings by the creator and like, yeah.
I agree with Brian's take. I think so. Brian's point is that there is some intrinsic value to the NFTs backing a token, and so the community value is less important in those tokens because, so for instance, like there's a vault of NFTs in Whale, and I think it's worth like $1 million now or $2 million, and so this at least justify the value of the token, but the value is a bit higher now because there's a really engaged community. But yeah, so I would still classify it as social tokens, although they do have a floor because we know that basket of NFT can be resellable at least on average for X price. And unlike other social tokens, like maybe like JAMM or Alex, the value is really in the community or the person underlying, and that's more intangible. And so that way, it's really the community or the person that is priced.
Alex and Brian, so you guys have your JAMM and Alex token. What inspired you guys to create your own personal tokens?
Alex, you can go first.
Okay. So like my personal token, so first of all, like the reason I even made it to crypto is because of a personal token. Basically, I was in San Francisco. I really wanted to go to Berlin Blockchain Week. At the time, I knew no one in Ethereum. That was August 2019. And Peter Pan, like the summoner of Metacartel, which is like basically like a DAO funding Ethereum startups, gave me like $1,500. But he told me he could not really repay that short term. It was like really the miss of the bear market. And so he basically tokenized my debt, and he created a token called Alex Masmej Loan 2019. And he minted 1,500 of those tokens, redeemable for 1.10 DAI, so 10% interest a year later. And so following this, I got contacted by Turley, who told me like, we are like working on, marketing the social token, and you've done this yourself. Like, do you want to do a generalized version of this experiment? And I said, yes. Didn't do anything for 6 months because I don't think the freelancer token really works unless you have a very unique and rare skill set. And so, yeah, like the Alex token happened in March because COVID happened. I wanted to switch back and like focus on doing a startup and like not do a normal job and optimize my impact. And so the token sale happened, and that kickstarted quite a lot of enthusiasm around my token. And this is why I've continued to carry it forward. So it was like the COVID crisis for me that made the Alex token a reality.
Interesting. And Cooper, you are the talent agency for both Alex and Brian, but you don't have a personal token. So are you looking to launch your own personal token as well? Or basically, what's your role being the talent agency for both Alex and Brian?
Yeah, so the space is incredibly early right now. I think on my end, just trying to set better standards around personal tokens is something I'm really interested in. In the case of the personal token agency, so Brian basically launched a newsletter post that, hey, my token's available on Uniswap. And then we saw this huge run up in price. And it just sort of showed how early things were and sort of like how out of control everything really was. And for me, I basically just said, hey, like how can I work with multiple creators and just better standardize the way in which we market personal tokens, the use cases around them, sort of just like anything to give it more legitimacy. I think that there's a lot of sentiment in the space that social tokens are a joke, that they're just pump and dump schemes and whatnot. And I'm willing to stake my reputation on that and say I think that there's really a lot of value here. And I want to do what I can to better build out the tools so that people can recognize it's not a flash in the pan thing. It's something that's very much here to stay.
Let's talk about how you guys created your personal tokens, right? Do you need any technical knowledge in deploying your social tokens, or was it sort of like just point and click and then just like I know you guys use Roll, but I just wanted to hear like, are they like, what was like the process? Do you need any technical knowledge or no knowledge? Like everything was done by the Roll side.
So Roll has a ERC20 contract that's being minted, but it's actually very easy to do it even without Roll. So there's stakeonly.com right now, which has a UI where it's a bonding curve model. It's not like just minting a token and Roll puts liquidity, which is their model. But you can mint your own ERC20 on stakeonly.com and it works. But yeah, like you don't really need much technical knowledge, but it's assumed that you have to be a crypto native for now. And so is your audience. And this is why probably like Weekend, Brian and I and other communities like Comma create our own personal token versus others, which are in the mainstream Web2 community. It's much, much harder for them because even if they get it, like their audience might not understand.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where like Roll slightly helps because they do have links with QR code where you can give your tokens for free, but there's no way to monetize it. There is no fiat on ramp, so you can't pay with credit cards. So there's lots of things missing in the space, but there's a lot of excitement around Rally, Foundation, Zora, and others to basically make it as easy as possible for normal people to mint their own token.
one of the biggest problems with social tokens is distribution to your audience. Something that really hasn't been figured out yet. Most of the time you have a social token, especially for role, where the creator ends up having a majority of the supply, and you're trying to figure out how to get in the hands of investors or users who are actually willing to use it in some capacity, kind of increase the value of it. Some people like Alex and others use liquidity mining campaigns do that, because liquidity is one of the biggest issues of social tokens. But really, what has yet to be discovered, one of the biggest issues, I think, is how do you find someone who's willing to contribute to make the token more valuable, outside of kind of a one-off use case. And I think there are these templates, as I mentioned before, for token distribution specifically, that are yet to be discovered, that help with liquidity and help with distribution, to make it more valuable for others to get involved.
And is
yeah,
road?
I think that's really.
Sorry, Cooper.
I was just going to add on to that. I think distribution is a really big piece of the puzzle that we haven't figured out yet. So at Audius, which for people who don't know, it's a music streaming platform. We're basically thinking about how to use streaming as a way to distribute social tokens. So the more that you stream an artist's music, the more tokens you earn in return. Issuance is a really tricky problem, but I think the ongoing forward distribution of tokens based on algorithmic or programmatic distribution strategies is going to be really important. Right now it's basically like do an action and then the creator goes and airdrops you tokens based on like a Google form or based on a link, as Alex said. But I think that more ways to distribute tokens automatically is going to be a huge upside for the way in which, creators don't have to worry as much about doing that manual distribution. They can just focus on creating value and letting tokens naturally fizzle out to where they're supposed to go.
And distribution for Alex token was interesting, right? Your personal token is slightly different. Was during your fundraise, you actually did a fundraise and you had a income sharing agreement portion where token holders get to share 15% of your earnings in the next 3 years. Disclaimer: I found this idea of income sharing agreement very interesting, and I participated in Alex token sale at the start of the year. What's your thoughts about this income sharing agreement? I thought it was very interesting. I think more people should be doing it, but so far it seems to me that you are the only person who has issued such a token. So yeah, are you worried about this, or do you see more people doing it? Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts about it.
I think so. Like, people in the crypto space come from like all different backgrounds, but for me, I was really in the startup Silicon Valley world, and it's been a few years now that ISAs are really hot. So Lambda School is providing software engineers to front run their education price. And then in exchange, you get 15% of their income capped at $50,000. Or James Gallagher, which is a young person that's exceptionally talented. He did a personal token of himself. He also did Control My Life as well. But all of these things were in the normal web format. And when I asked those people, they were like, oh, it's such a pain to distribute my revenue for taxes. For instance, like OnDeck, try to do ISAs with Web2 and normal things, but they basically stopped it because there's too much friction in the normal world. And so I had this knowledge from the startup world that didn't know about crypto, and I knew about crypto, and I had a small community at the time. And so this is why I did it. I think for it to scale, it needs to be, we need a legal framework. What I've done is amateur, but it was necessary for pioneering this because I did not know this was going to be successful, and I did a very tiny amount, and everything is going well so far. But for a company to do this at scale, you need a legal template that is replicable and that can make it easier, because right now it's a lot of manual work, and it's almost like basically I don't know what to say, like informal contract between me and 30 people, just like exchanging tokens, more than an actual income sharing agreement by the standards of the US jurisdiction.
So one thing that I've gone back and forth with Alex is about how to actually tokenize income and how to share that with token holders. One of the biggest learnings I have in the NFT space is that you can actually use NFTs to represent on-chain cash flows in some capacity, right? So one of the problems you have with ISAs is that you don't really know what's income and what is just profit in some of the capacity, so you don't actually know what goes back to token holders. But if you can tokenize on-chain cash flow in some capacity, like in Super Rare, where you have a royalty that goes back to digital artists on every single sale, you can actually have that as a tradable NFT as the future income of that digital artist, right? And that can be traded on a secondary market. So you can have tokenized ISA kind of in that capacity where you have, income for specific smart contract kind of in that capacity. And I think we'll see more of that as opposed to the actual ISA agreement, because it's much easier to use capacity, and there's as an existing standard with NFTs occurring in that capacity. So social tokens and NFTs will kind of merge together in that capacity, and represent the tokenized income for in that world.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, one of the questions that came in from the audience, Carol Kalin, she asked, no, actually from Eric. Eric asked this question: what's it going to take for? I mean, at this point in time, social tokens pretty much like, it's kind of like a niche thing where people in the crypto space sort of buy tokens from other people in the space. But what do you guys think it would take for social tokens to capture adoption outside the crypto circle?
I think it's just better tooling. We've said it at the top of this call right now. A lot of social token stuff is just very crypto native, and that's great. It's a niche that we're all comfortable working in, but just better on-ramps, better accessibility, and then making it so that people can actually use these tokens without having a background in crypto. Tokenized Discord's great, tokenized Telegram's great, but you still need to have MetaMask, you need to be familiar hooking up a bot. When it becomes seamless that you're basically able to use a personal token without having any familiarity of Ethereum or what's going on under the hood, I think that's the point in which we'll see a lot more wide set adoption.
Mm.
I think creators themselves need to recognize that there's a better monetization opportunity with social tokens as opposed to being on one of the existing platforms, right? It's when Twitch streamers or YouTubers or TikTokers are using social tokens to actually monetize their own audience versus using one of the existing platforms, right? Because there's higher upside sort of in that capacity. And I think once one or two creators start really nailing the right recipe, that you'll see a lot more creators follow in those footsteps. So it will kind of, lead with creators, and then fans will probably follow afterwards.
Yeah. So Brian, I really love, me and you were having a conversation about how social tokens are very interoperable in nature. They're very composable, and how creators can have it across many platforms, which is something they don't really have today. Do you want to talk a little bit about that conversation, and for creators, why this is advantageous if you have a following on multiple different social platforms?
Yeah. So one of the biggest issues right now for creators is that, once they get deplatformed on say YouTube, it's really hard for them to kind of build another following on another platform, say like YouTube or like TikTok or Twitch in some capacity, right? The interesting thing about social tokens is that because they're programmable and droppable across platforms, is they can basically, have their existing token holders be carried over to different platforms sort of in that capacity, so they don't need to rebuild any of their existing follower social graphs. So I think that, it'll be much easier for creators to, start on one platform with a social token and then carry over to another platform and sort of that capacity, and just use a social token as sort of the community currency between each of these platforms. So that might be a much more popular path instead of, trying to build up new audiences every single time there's a new social media platform coming around.
But how do you distribute the tokens on this social media platform? I mean, Brian, I think you tried to distribute your JAMM token on Substack, but I think Stripe found out about it and they kick you off the platform, or was it Substack? Or like how do you distribute when you get deplatformed like instantly the moment you do it?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because a lot of these social media platforms have strict control over what is being done with the creators on the platform. I think for me specifically, I was distributing JAMM to JAMM subscribers because I wanted to reward them sort of in loyalty for subscribing to my newsletter for a long period of time. And so I think that you'll have, as Group mentioned, like you'll have, people distributing social tokens to existing media platforms, but Spotify would never allow someone to kind of distribute tokens to Spotify. You need to have sort of a decentralized streaming service for that sort of to happen in a more of a programmatic way that makes a lot more sense. But yeah, you'll see a lot of more interesting social token distribution approaches, but leveraging existing social media platforms. You'll have to play this cat and mouse game between the social media platforms and sort of social token issuers, where you're trying to have one kind of leveraging the other and siphoning a lot of the existing creator talent to come over to the social token issuer side.
What sort of utilities do you think personal token holder creators can give to token holders? I know some of your tokens, Alex and Brian, have some utility. I think the main thing that we saw this year is that this Telegram and Discord bot integration, which I thought was a very big innovation by itself, the collab land bot. But just curious to hear, like, besides like gated communities on Telegram, on Discord, on a gated newsletter, what are the things you can be done for social personal tokens?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that the token permission access is a huge ballpark in and of itself. You know, you mentioned Telegram, Discord to start. Brian has his newsletter that he's doing. I think we're going to see a bunch of other use cases where you hold X amount of tokens and get unlock Y service or Y content, for example. I think we've only just scratched the surface of like what that unlock is capable of, but I'm definitely really bullish on that being a leading narrative around social tokens, and sort of the way that they're adopted is better structuring the tiers in which your true fans can unlock more and more content in your community for their holdings.
Yeah, I think we have only scratched the surface. Like, if you look at it on social media, like, what are algorithms, right? They are a set of incentives. And if you can craft your own set of incentives for your true fans, you can just disproportionately have a huge advantage over those platforms. And so I'm betting that the first few artists, maybe not the top ones because they're basically like, they have so much like success that it might not need it, but the B-list artists that trigger social media incentives, like I will give you 10 tokens if you share or retweet, or if you do a certain hashtag that will just propel me to the algorithm, that's an enormous edge. And we haven't seen this yet. So I'm really curious about it, and I'm looking actually forward to a tool that does this. There are some tools on Twitter where you can like maximize retweet, but it doesn't really feel very organic, and like people have to install something. Like if it's just airdrop to address, even like a Merkle drop where it saves on gas, I would be super interested. And I think this is the next big thing, especially when we're talking about creators that want to be discovered, is how to incentivize people to share their work. One artist is going to do that, and one artist is going to break social media. Like everyone's going to hear about that artist. I don't know who that is, but I'm excited about it.
So the reason why we haven't seen a lot of rewarding for engagement so far.
Just on a really interesting.
Sorry, Cooper. I mean, the reason why we haven't seen the rewarding social media engagement so far is because of civil resistance problems, right? If you were to ever reward engagement in some capacity, you'll just have people, just bots, kind of spamming the system in order to earn rewards, right? And social media doesn't really have a KYC enabled platform to kind of allow for this sort of behavior in some capacity. And so it kind of gets in this weird territory of, you know, who's a bot and who's not, and that kind of amplifies the existing social media problems in sort of that way. I think there are two interesting ways where people can kind of contribute right now outside of the personal token issuer, and that is through liquidity, which, you know, Alex has kind of pioneering with liquidity mining campaigns for Alex, and also referrals. So, you know, it's really, the referrals piece really hasn't been discovered yet. And I think Alex is touching on, like, how do you get more token holders into the system in some capacity, or increase the distribution of that social token issuer. But if we figure out a way to actually have referrals for people to, you know, discover new music, to, you know, to look at and subscribe to a newsletter, things that actually have on-chain cash flow attached to it, and you know, rewarding the user in a social token for sort of like facilitating that on-chain cash flow, can be really interesting in ways to, you know, start rewarding users for helping that personal token issuer increase the reach of their brand or increase the revenue in sort of some capacity, while also preserving that civil resistance mechanism.
Yeah. And I was going to add on, I think, you know, one of the reasons I'm so excited about social tokens right now is basically just the innovation around these ideas, and sort of how many people are working on new tools to better distribute tokens in like a legacy fashion, you know, in a very organic fashion. There's a hackathon coming up specifically for social tokens, and the tool that Alex mentioned is something that he's going to be running a bounty on. I think that that's just like one testament that, you know, this is not just like a fad. This isn't just like people in a silo making their own personal tokens. Like there's now a uniform community forming around the sector, and there's tools being built around it, and just very early signs that this is a very collectively shared sector, and one that I think that people should definitely be paying attention to.
What sort of ideas do you guys have in mind with Audius with regards to social token distribution for musicians?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I think that forward-looking distribution is a really challenging thing. So basically what we're working on is how can you distribute tokens to people who play your content, whether that's as a listener, as a curator who drives streams back to your account. And then from there, basically, how do you gate exclusive content solely to your true fans? So, in music right now, basically, a lot of artists have unreleased tracks, but the problem is they'll send a link out and then anyone can just sort of share that link. You kind of have to trust that they're not going to send it to someone else to listen to. And in the case of social tokens, with these token gates, you can send someone a link, but if they don't have that token holding in their portfolio, they're not going to be able to play it. So you can think of that for unreleased content. You can think of that for stems, remix contests where only people who have a certain amount of tokens can participate and submit. So, really just any way to better share private content within a very selective group of people. And there's not really a great way to do that right now. So for Audius, that's sort of where we're thinking about fitting into the mix of how social tokens can benefit musicians.
It's going to be a bit of a, at this point in time, couldn't you guys create like a gated Web 2 lock-in system and host the hidden content behind that gate or that paywall instead of like kind of using I see the point of having the social token as an entry to this platform as well, but I just want to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the biggest difference here is that as a fan of an artist, right now I have no way to capture the upside of someone that I found very early on from the utility of the social token itself. Just having a mechanism to basically contribute to a musician's shared upside is incredibly novel in and of itself. If I'm streaming an artist all the time and I can earn a token with real financial value, I think that drastically outcompetes any form of financial curation that a listener or a fan has today, specifically in music.
Yeah, I think that's, now that you brought up this point, it's interesting because not only do I have this Web3 access, but the fact that I get all this hidden content and I share the upside of the artist is interesting. And I thought like this, what the Uniswap guys did with this retrospective Uniswap token airdrop was very interesting. So the fact that you use Uniswap and you get rewarded for it, that's fantastic. Over here at CoinGecko, we have this story. We have an intern that came in like maybe earlier this year, like maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and we asked her to use Uniswap and just to learn the space. And then she's left the company since then, went to work somewhere else. A couple of days ago, one of our guys just messaged this intern again, hey, go back to your Uniswap, check that, you probably received this 400 Uni airdrop token, and that's probably like way more money than what she got paid for her internship over here at CoinGecko. So yeah, I think this retrospective action shows like it really rewards people who are early adopters, and as the ecosystem grow, like you share on the upside. So I think it's interesting to see how this play on in the social token space.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add really quickly on that front. So on the musician side of things, I'm working with an artist named RAC. He's a pretty prolific electronic producer, and he's working on community token. And something that we're looking into is retroactive distributions for Patreon subscribers, for people who participate in basically this tape offering through Zora. And I totally agree that moving forward, social creators who are aware of what's going on in crypto will definitely be using retroactive distribution to their advantage. It's an incredible trend and one that I'm excited to build out more.
Yeah, I think the hard part is how do you measure like your early fans? How do you keep track of all your early adopters? Like I guess Patreon is one way, but if like it's hard to imagine like who are your early listeners on Spotify, I suppose. I don't know if you can get this data, but like if you do, that would be really interesting to find a way that, hey, you listen on Spotify, like maybe you're logged in via Spotify, it downloads your listening history, and if you listen to this song like from this date, like you get like some token. That would be pretty cool, I would say.
I think like something also used about Audius in the future is the fact that artists could set their own stream music price. And that's really amazing because right now Spotify and Apple Music have been bargaining like their price at a huge discount. And like, for instance, like they were offering 3 months free for their users and not paying the artist during the 3 months. So it's literally it's literally the most like obnoxious form of rent seeking. And they had to have Taylor Swift, one of the industry superstar, to vouch for them. And then Tidal to kind of like come with like very high quality artists to say like, we're going to fork our own thing, but it wasn't as great. And so once you can set your own streaming price, you control more of literally what you should own in the first place, right? So like, yeah, the music industry is just, I think you don't get like a dime on what you are paid. And I think if you look at market cap, like the music industry market cap, I think is 30 billion, which is tinier than probably like Dogecoin and things like this, right? It's like ridiculously low. and we can expand it. I think people are willing to pay more for music. It's just we have to have a different kind of monetization.
Mm-hmm. Someone asked a question. Carol asked a question, right? So, do you guys see politicians making use of social tokens as part of their political campaign? So, like, I don't know, maybe the US election is probably big. Like, do you see like, or maybe some other, like, it doesn't matter which election, right? But do you see politicians like engaging with their voters with the use of a social token?
I think so. I think all the bottom-up politicians will benefit from this. And so, like, for instance, Donald Trump, right, like, is a bit of a populist. So basically it would increase populism. And like, for instance, like Andrew Yang, which was also someone from the internet, very good at Twitter, like very good at memes, would also have benefited from a social token, but he was just not ready at the time. And maybe that would push forward a candidate that otherwise would not have been taken seriously. So I think for fundraising, and then the early fundraiser get wealthy and they drop their job to work at the fundraising team and, you know, create a community out of scratch. For me, it's very likely that politicians is a great use case.
So I would probably disagree in that case. Like the case of like, personal tokens, social tokens is the programmable access or the exclusive access that you get for, having that token in some capacity and the utility value kind of tied to it. If you're fundraising with just like a token in some capacity, there's no actual use case to it. It's probably not useful, and it's probably not a utility token. So you would actually, the reason for social token is the exclusive access in itself, right? I think that case can actually be disproved if we start seeing protocol politicians starting to use it in DeFi and governance, right? If I think that this protocol politician thing is becoming more popular over the next couple of months as more governance tokens come out. But if we see more protocol politicians start using it for their own brand and for people to delegate to them in some capacity, say, okay, if you delegate to me, I'll give you some of my social token, then maybe that use case can be expanded to outside politics. But we really need to see kind of that use case be played out first before we see any of this kind of happen, right? But even to that use case of receiving social tokens for delegating, you start having bribery kind of coming more into fruition, right? So it gets like a really sticky use case, right? I think even just like cryptocurrency donations are probably something that needs to be adopted first before we start to see any of the social token stuff come out more.
Yeah.
So so basically, like, my argument for utility of the politicians is basically the first 200 fundraising participants would get an ever diminishing percentage of the future fundraising. So basically, like, like you get a share of the remaining of that fundraising amount. So it basically creates basically a pyramid scheme, but like in a good way, for incentivizing early people, right?
But I think, Brian, you brought up an interesting point about protocol politicians. You're right. I think with the launch of all these governance tokens on Uniswap, Compound, Balancer, and many more, like there will be people who will be campaigning very strongly, not just on one platform, but across several platforms. And then, I can imagine like protocol politicians rising, and it would be interesting if they start issuing their own token, and I don't know how to share. I mean, Cooper, you are pretty active in all these governance forums. I saw your names in many of these forums. Maybe it might be something interesting for you to consider.
Yeah, it's really interesting because right now there's not a ton of incentives in place to get delegated to. I think that it's great socially, and you get a lot of respect for being an active participant, but many of these systems don't yet reward you for being a leading politician, for making proposals, for basically aggregating voting power. So until there's like a direct financial incentive to basically curate voting power, I think that it's just going to be largely a hobbyist thing in the short term, which is fine. But I think that, to Brian's point about the lens in which we frame social tokens in a political sense, it's very much crypto native first. And the only way that we're going to see adoption is if there's actually something for that politician to gain by having more voting weight outside of just being able to make other proposals, which is not too exciting in nature from my perspective.
Let's talk about liquidity mining. So, Alex, you recently did some liquidity mining for your personal token in collaboration with Whale. What are your thoughts for the potential for more cross-pollination among the various social tokens out there? Because otherwise, everyone seems to be forming their own island. Yeah, I would start to hear your thoughts about that.
So, yeah, I think this was a great experiment of liquidity mining, because basically what we did. So first of all, like, I cannot play the scarcity as a service like Zorain Foundation game, because for 6 months my token was live. I gave it to many people because it was basically free, and so it was already very liquid. And so like, it was already much more liquid than if I really wanted to have the exclusivity part. And yeah, like, Whale approached me, and the reason why we did this is it's basically marketing, but the value, instead of being given to advertisers to broadcast to users, it's exchange between users. Because now I give 50,000 Alex to the NFT vault of Whale, and Whale is going to be airdropped to Alex liquidity providers on Balancer and Uniswap. So all the value was basically given to each other. Every community is hearing about the others. We've done like AMA and things like this. So it's a nice way of basically collaborating with skin in the game. So we know this is not, a facade and I don't like Whale, etc. Like, I like their project. I think it's a great community. It's basically the YFI of NFT. So they are still very like money incentivized, but they're gathering a really great collection of NFTs. And it's interesting seeing that one Whale actually shared his collection for other to chip in, and maybe one day they'll do like, I don't know, like real world gallery with all the NFT that they own. Like, there can be cool stuff with that community, and I just like the project. And basically, yeah, social token as a reputation layer is great. And so I guess we endorsed each other.
Yeah. I'd add in there real quick. I think the core reason why liquidity mining happened here is because social tokens are naturally highly illiquid. For Alex's token specifically, if you went to buy 1 ETH worth of tokens, you incurred like 5% slippage. And, specifically in this sector where it is really scarce, there's not a liquidity on the table. There's not like a fundraise or a core team that did a seed round to basically back liquidity. Programs like this become much more valuable and like actually play a really crucial role. And that's kind of contrary to, there's other projects in the space where liquidity mining is more just like a marketing scheme and like a good thing to do rather than it actually being necessary. So in this case, I think it's really important and something that basically every social token creator needs to take into account.
Yeah,
but the downside to liquidity mining is that these programs cannot last forever, and there's only a short-term thing. So there's only so long that you can incentivize this before everything. Once the incentive is gone, the liquidity goes away as well. Right.
Well, actually, since role investing is very long, it takes like 2 years. I actually can take some of that supply for the next 2 years and incentivize people. But yeah, like before, people were asking me OTC because the Uniswap price for over $1,000 was way too liquid, and now it's the opposite. Now I don't get asked anymore, and I can see people doing large buy orders if they're bullish on me, my potential, and the potential of that token. And so it makes for a much more fluid market.
I think I'll add 2 things here. One, I think, Bobby, your point's spot on that liquidity mining is just marketing, right? I think social token issuers need to focus on their product and actual utility value of the token to create more value for it before, engage in a liquidity mining campaign, right? I don't have a liquidity mining campaign for my token. I probably won't for a while because I really want to focus on, the tokenized access product and make sure people are actually finding value and holding the token before, engaging some liquidity mining campaign. But I think this really comes back to the crux of like token distribution in itself, right? And I think we need to find new ways to have token distribution actually work for social token issuers. Like using something like a token bonding curve, stake on me makes, kind of way more sense in a lot of capacity, because then you have guaranteed liquidity for holders themselves instead of trying to use a Uniswap liquidity pool, right? Bonding curves themselves kind of help more of the long tail tokens, kind of take shape in sort of that capacity. So I think social token issuers should start looking towards that approach as more to mint their own social tokens instead of, trying to mint their own token through Roll or any of the ERC-centric contract, because it would just make their lives a lot easier instead of trying to manage liquidity. The first day I issued my social token, put in the quick pool, I told Cooper like, hey man, I can't do this in the long term. This is just a lot to handle trying to manage all this liquidity And, I need someone to kind of help me kind of do all this stuff because it's kind of confusing. So that's kind of when I gave Cooper the idea of the personal token agency, because I was just like, hey, this is just way too much, right? So I think we just need to kind of get back to the roots and figure out other ways to figure out how to do social token distribution, through something like a bonding curve instead.
I agree.
Yeah, totally. And the thing I'll add on to that really quick is just that, to your point, Bobby, liquidity mining incentives are not meant to be something in perpetuity. If you go basically a year with incentives and then you can't make a strong enough argument for people to be providing liquidity in the first place, then you're just not doing a good job as an issuer, as a creator, right? Like, it's a good bootstrapping mechanism, but I don't think that relying on giving people free tokens, and this is everything beyond social tokens and DeFi as well. Basically figuring out how to just change it from a bootstrapping mechanism into being sustainable because you have a killer product or service is like sort of the trajectory that I see happening here.
Mm-hmm. But like Uniswap uses some sort of it's a bonding curve as well, right? I mean, Brian, are you suggesting that social token should have its own bonding curve, like how Nexus Mutual has its own bonding curve, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, bonding curve is
the social. It's just the social token issuer. Like, if we're going to have 100,000 millions of different creators coming into the space, like, they shouldn't need to learn how to manage strong liquidity for the social tokens, right? It's you need to have some sort of collateral that acts as being able to do that sort of their own, right? It should be really seamless for the way that social tokens are distributed in some capacity, in the way that they're managed, right? We kind of need to rethink how these social tokens are kind of played from the ground up in a lot of these capacities. I think the Nexus Mutual model makes a lot of sense.
Alex, so I'm not super familiar with this whale project. Was it created by a single individual who has a lot of NFTs, and then he decided to form this community and then put all these NFTs as part of the collateral of this whale collection? Or was it a group of people coming together with the whale, or who runs the whale? I'm not so sure if he's anonymous or he's publicly accessible.
Guy who did like a pretty classic consulting career and became a NFT collector on the side, and then decided to create tokens that represent a share of his vault. And then he started basically giving tokens for depositing NFTs in that vault. And then he started doing liquidity mining as well, which happens for all the non-bonding curve tokens, because bonding curve is algorithmic, but here it's market-based. So like, he wanted more liquidity. And so you can stake NFTs for whale, I think, and you can also stake your whale itself for more whale. And that actually worked because it's a massive community. Like, it's insane. So we've done a collaboration. I've been on their Discord, and it's a bit like Wi-Fi. It's insane the amount of people that are obsessed with it and like literally left their job to work at whale. So it's impressive.
And I just remember. Sorry, I was going to say, I just remember being in the Discord when Whale launched, and there was a bunch of basically like Discord React things that you could do. So if you reacted to like a drop and you clicked an emoji in the first like 10 seconds, you got Whale through a Discord wallet. So like, that in and of itself was a cool primitive, but just sort of, there was so many people in there, man. I mean, there was like 500 to 1,000 people basically like spamming emojis to try and claim this drop right when it happened. And, in terms of the social token landscape, I think it was easily the most active and engaged community I had seen from day one. So it's really no surprise to me that, it's done so well since then.
All right. Running towards the end of this session, let me see if there's any interesting questions from the audience that I can pick up for to us. Let me see. Someone, Sismon asked, what's the biggest barrier for social tokens going mainstream? I think Cooper answered this question just now. Better tooling on social tokens. And then Pinnacle.eth asks, are social tokens meant for speculation and investment? I have a hard time envisioning ERC20 use cases with such high gas prices. You guys want to comment on that?
On top of the tooling, social tokens are still limited by all the DeFi bottlenecks. So like we need layer 2 privacy, UX, scalability, all of this, fiat on ramps as well. But one silver lining is that DeFi is very big, but it's a group of people that don't really connect with the outside world, versus we've seen the personal tokens and community tokens actually go a little bit outside. So like I was featured on some mainstream media because of my token clickbait aspect, but also Spencer Dinwiddie from the NBA, a basketball player, with his personal token as well, tokenizing his contract. And so we are seeing that it's a bit like CryptoKitties in 2017. Like it's not as popular as NFT, but the exciting ones break through the bubble of crypto. And that's something that we don't see often in this space.
Yeah, and I'll comment really quickly on that gas cost thing. So one of the key paradigms to keep in mind here is that with token-based access, you just need to hold the tokens in your wallet one time. You're only just signing transactions in order to access things. I think that's drastically different than having to pay the amount of tokens to access some service. So you're not paying gas costs every time you use these benefits or products. You're basically just acquiring tokens one time at inception. You're good to go for as long as you're using the service, and then you have the freedom to basically liquidate whenever you want or whenever you think that you don't need the service anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point, because token-based access is kind of the reason that social tokens got big in the first place with Karma and JAMM and a couple other social token issuers, right? But the reason that sidechains and scalability actually matters is because we need on-chain cash flows to really benefit the creator in a lot of these capacities and have tokenized ISAs, right? But if the user is paying more in gas than they are the actual access to the subscription or some of these other things, then it's not worth it, right? That's the reason why we have been seeing sort of on-chain cash flows to creators kind of happen on Ethereum, because these users only want to pay a few cents to stream a song or to access a newsletter, right? Or access content, right? But they're spending, $1, $2 to access that content. So it's not, you don't have that on-chain cash flow. So I think we'll see more of these, the XDAI and, the Nears of the world kind of, have a better use case for some of these social tokens to actually come to fruition and have more of those on-chain cash flows approaches outside of tokenized access.
Yeah, I thought that Telegram and Discord bot was interesting. So I've used it to join some tokenized communities, and I thought like once I have in, I can sort of move the tokens out or sell the tokens, and I still have access to the Telegram group. What surprised me was the bot actually constantly checks for me having this still having this token, and if once I move the token out of the wallet, I got kicked out of the group. I think I was in your group, Ryan, and the bot was a bit buggy and it kicked me out a few times, and then when I came back, I said everyone thought I sold your JAMM token.
Social shaming, yeah. You got shamed.
Yeah, but it was pretty funny. That was pretty fun. Yeah. Yeah, cool guys. I think we're wrapping up the meetup for today. Any last words that you want to say about social tokens before we close this up?
I think on my front, just keep a close eye on the space. I know that Alex and Brian are two prolific creators in the social token space, but there are a lot of people that are very interested in it. There's a lot of platforms that are working very closely on making better tools and better products around social tokens. Just as DeFi was super early on, and you saw a couple examples of really great projects, I'm seeing the very same thing happening in the social token space. So, while there might be naysayers out there, I'm very, very bullish on it, and I think that it's something that everyone should give a second look if you haven't already.
I would say check out Seed Club, which is the Y Combinator for personal and community tokens. And there's a cohort, there's a hackathon coming soon, and I know Brian and Cooper are involved as well. And so if you want to create your own personal token or community token or want to be part of one, you should definitely join.
Yeah, I'll second that. Definitely keep an eye out on Seed Club.
Cool, guys. Thanks a lot for taking the time to come on the show. But more importantly, thank you all the audience on this meetup on Crowdcast. Super happy that all of you are able to join us for this CoinGecko meetup. Use it. Super happy to have the three of you join us here, Alex, Brian, and Cooper. Thank you very much. I think we learned a lot for these insights that you shared. Definitely learned a lot of social tokens and yeah, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us on the CoinGecko meetup. We'll have another one next month and let's see what happens. Wrapping up, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.